Hi, everybody. This is Vladimira Kuna, and I am absolutely honored and thrilled to welcome Neale Donald Walsch, who I don't believe needs an introduction, but I'm going to introduce him anyway, in case you haven't heard. And I love Neale accepting this invitation because I'm truly passionate about reading his books, Conversations with God, which really, really deeply positively impacted my growth and understanding how the world works and who we are. And I recently been listening to his new book, The God Solution, and wow. Welcome, Neale. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you.
It's lovely to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. Thanks for the invitation. How may I serve you?
I've absolutely loved reading The God Solution. It's very intriguing, and I would love to. I'm going to start like this. I usually ask clients to write themselves a letter and see themselves through God's eyes, because God sees us as this perfect higher form of creation. But it got me thinking, is it possible for human beings to love each other the way God loves us?
I think it's possible. If I didn't think it was possible, then the great spiritual masters of history would be bamboozlers, fakers, people, con men, people who were telling us things that weren't true. But all of the great spiritual masters through the ages, both female and male throughout the years, have told us the answer to your question. They have said, yes, not only is it possible to love each other as God loves us, but they have urged and encouraged us to do so. Now, I can't believe that all those great spiritual masters would be encouraging us to do something that it's impossible to do. So I think that the world's great spiritual masters have already answered your question. Clearly, it is possible for us to do, or they would not have been inviting us to do so.
No, I love The God Solution, and I'm going to read a little description about this book. Is it December 2020 you published it?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So the God Solutions, for everybody, it begins by posing some of the present questions at the time of massive global challenge. And I love the questions you ask. Is there really a God? Why is our world such a mess? Like, seeing what's happening in the world, why we can actually ask the question, why is it such a mess? If God existed, would he not take the problems away? And I love how you called this the God's dilemma, and suggest in your new book that we as humanity, we should solve, if we wish to solve our problems, we must take some dramatic and revolutionary theological step, create and break the definitions of God. And I thought, how would people respond to that? I kind of love that. But if we just now ask people that to call God different name, could you elaborate that?
Yeah, I think that the invitation is to create a new definition of God. And I believe that the new definition of God can be offered to humanity in two words: divine love. Now, when I say that, often I hear from people who say to me, oh, Neale, everyone agrees that God is love. Nobody disagrees, even though many religions disagree on some of the, what we call fine print, some of the individual rules and regulations. Everybody agrees that God is love. And I have to say to them, wait a minute. I didn't say God is love. I said God is pure love. And then some people will say, okay, what's the difference? And the difference is that pure love wants, needs, expects, and demands nothing in return. So it's revolutionary theologically, because the question becomes, is it possible for us to believe in a God who wants and needs nothing from us? A God who doesn't demand that we obey the Ten Commandments, a God who doesn't require us to be good in order to get back into heaven, a God who requires nothing from us. That's theologically revolutionary, because every religion on the face of the earth tells us that God has requirements, things that we have to do and things that we should not do if we really want to get to heaven. Even if there is a place called heaven, you know. So that's what our religions have taught us. And our religions have also taught us that if we don't do those things, not only will we not get to heaven, we will actually be punished eternally, forevermore, with unbelievable torture and anguish and pain that we call hell, Hades. And so we have been taught to believe in a God that we are supposed to be afraid of. And we've decided that God's behaviors are the way we should behave with each other. I mean, after all, if it's good enough for God, it should be good enough for us. So we behave the same way with each other. We love each other conditionally. I love you if. I love you if you do what I want you to do. If you don't do what I don't want you to do, I love you if you obey me. But if you break the rules, I will stop loving you. Worse than that, if you break the rules, I will not only stop loving you, I will hurt you. I will maybe even have to kill you. More people have been killed on this planet in our history in the name of God than for any other reason. Religious wars have been the biggest killers of human beings.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. You know, I love that you actually, sorry to interrupt you, I love that you said that, because I grew up in a very strong Catholic family, and there were so many rules, like don't do that, we must do that. So when I actually came across the conversations with God first time, it gave me a real deep understanding of God. Like, it's really probably challenging for me to explain why, but there were so many, like you just mentioned, so many rules, and we had to do that and we couldn't do that. And if I break this rule, this is going to happen to you and you're gonna go to hell. And I was really afraid of hell when I was a little girl. I remember I was like, and the fear was strong. And when you actually talk about pure love, God as a pure love, it is, I think it's fantastic concept. And when you mentioned the not expecting anything back or need, I think can humans actually get to the state of pure love?
Yes, I think it's possible for us to achieve that. Many people have had the same experience that you've had. I was raised as a Catholic as well. And I was told when I was 9 years old, I'll never forget it, the priest came into our classroom when I was 9 and told us that if we miss Mass on Sunday without a good excuse, it's a mortal sin as opposed to a venial sin. A mortal sin means you're going right to hell right after you die. So it's a major problem, a big offense against God. So if you miss Mass on Sunday, the priest said you have to have a good excuse. Maybe you're taking care of a sick parent, okay. or maybe for some reason you couldn't, maybe there was a big storm and you couldn't get to church, okay. Or maybe you're an adult and you had to work on Sunday, okay. But if you don't have a good excuse and you die before you go to confession, you're going to go to hell. Now, I'm 9 years old. I wasn't like 29 or 39 or even 19 where I could absorb such information, with an adult mind. I'm 9 years old. Now, you have to understand, this would happen the very week that I missed Mass because I went to play on the playground. I decided not to go to Mass that Sunday. I hardly ever missed Mass, but that week I wanted to go play baseball. Baseball is a peculiar American sport. and I wanted to go play baseball. So I missed Mass. Now the priest is telling me on Wednesday I'm going to go to hell. So, of course, I raced to the confessional. As soon as the class was over, I excused myself from school, but there aren't any confessions on Wednesday. They're only on Saturday in my church. So I had to wait until Saturday, and I had to, like you said, I was so scared that something would happen to me before Saturday, before I was, absolved of my sins by the priest who told me to, what my penance would be. So I'm trying to get to Saturday without dying so I don't go to hell because I didn't go to church last Sunday. Only when I became an adult did I start to ask, really? I mean, really? Can God be that vindictive that if you don't go to church every single Sunday of your life, you're going to hell? I mean, what kind of a God is that? I couldn't believe it. I thought, well, maybe that was an old-fashioned teaching from years ago. But I checked with the Catholic Church. They still teach the same thing today. All about mortal sins and venial sins and, what. So, yeah, I agree with you that we need to have a new definition of God. And it's revolutionary. And I could be wrong. If I'm wrong, that God does not love us that much, I guess I'm going to hell. But it's like George Bernard Shaw once said, if I'm going to hell, so be it. That's where all the interesting people are anyway.
My grandpa used to say that, actually. And talking about grandpa, I love how you refer to God as she. And when I actually first read the Conversations with God, and I mentioned this in front of my grandma, and she's still in those teachings, which we were just actually mentioning. She was like, you can't refer to God as she. I was like, well, she would not have any of the arguments. So it also gets an awareness and understanding to be open to something new. Do you think we can actually accept it? I mean, what is missing in an understanding of true love?
We can't imagine any divine entity who needs nothing. What's missing in our understanding is what divinity really is. If divinity really is all-powerful, almighty, and the creator of everything that is, what could the divinity need or want or require or demand or be angry about if it didn't get it? It's totally crazy way to think. So but we've been told this by virtually every religion on the face of the earth. Some religions say that if you're a woman, you have to cover yourself from head to toe. You can't let your face be seen. You can't let your body be seen, because it's against God's rules. You have to cover yourself. And I don't understand. If you have to cover yourself from head to toe, how do you even make babies? Oh, that's when the whole idea of sexuality became not okay as well, because you're not supposed to. I mean, we've created these crazy ideas about life and who we are and God, but of course God's a woman. Anyone who's married, any man who is married understands that. The boss in my house is my wife, obviously.
I'd love to say my husband's a boss, but I can't say. Although sometimes I try and tell him he's the one in charge. He said, well, eventually you're the woman in charge. We do it with a loving heart.
Yes, my wife gets whatever she wants, and she has the final word on everything, whether it's how the living room will be decorated, where the furniture will go, what we're spending our money on, what kind of car we should buy, what kind of food we should eat, how I should dress. Even when I dress up to go out, I go to her, is this okay? And she's not going to, you're not going to wear that blue coat, are you? Don't wear that coat. You don't look good in that coat. Wear your brown coat. Yes, ma'am, you're the boss of all things. So I understand who the boss is in my house. And so God must be a woman, because a man wouldn't care whether you got the blue coat or the brown coat on. Only a woman would care. Only a woman would care where the chair goes in the living room. No, it can't go there. It can't go there. It's got to go there.
And she has a reason, right?
Of course. So, whatever I've learned, whatever you say, dear, whatever you say.
Talking about your wife, did you mention a lovely creature in the God solution? I really loved you mentioning, if we created our own religion, like what would it be? How would we preach it? Like we could create our own religion where people would actually follow us. And I really thought about that. Like, how we opinionated so many times on God. But if we had the responsibility to actually create our own religion, I thought, I don't know how it looked.
And to create a religion that everybody in the universe, everybody in the world would have to obey, would have to live by. What religion would we create? Interesting question.
It is a very interesting question.
And I invite, in the book, I invite people to answer the question.
I still haven't finished the answer, and I've thought and entertained that question many times. You go somewhere and then you change the perception and you think like, that wouldn't work, or would it? It is a really interesting question. What religion would you create?
I would create a religion that says two things. Life is forever. You cannot die. You simply change form, but you are a spiritual entity who lives eternally. And the second thing it would say is, you will never be separate from or other than divinity, that you and divinity are one expression of life, that divinity resides within every living, sentient being in the universe, not just on Earth. And so, therefore, you are free to create the reality within yourself that you wish to experience. And you will never be punished or judged or condemned because of what you have decided to think or do or be.
I love that. I'm going to be your first follower. It brings me back to you. I've heard you saying once that we are individualized waves, but we're part of the ocean. That really nicely syncs with your second rule you said. We're part of. Do you remember?
Of course, yes. It's a wonderful analogy. God said to me, if you really want to understand your relationship with me, God said, think of yourself as a wave on the surface of the ocean. You're not other than the ocean. You're not separate from the ocean. You're simply an arising of the ocean in individuated form, magnificent, beautiful, powerful, spectacular form. And when your expression is complete, you recede back into the ocean from which you came. It was a wonderful metaphor, a wonderful example that the human mind could understand. Oh, I see. The wave is not the ocean. It's an expression, an individual arising of the ocean. But no one suggests that the wave is the entire ocean. So when people say to me, oh, Neale, you think you're God? I say, no, I didn't say that I'm God. I said that I'm an individuation of God, that God resides within me, and that every sentient being in the cosmos is an individual expression of the divine.
That is a beautiful analogy. I love that. You know, at the beginning of the book, when you actually the questions which you ask were, if there is a God, why is the world such a mess? Like everything that's happening, I'm not pinpointing, but literally whatever is happening in the world, why is God not taking away the problems?
Well, the answer for me is very simple. God's purpose, God's intention is not to create a bunch of minions, a bunch of subjects, like a royalty, like a king or a queen would create subjects, or like a dictator would create minions, people who had to obey. That wasn't God's intention, because it's not God's greatest joy. God's greatest joy is to create life and life forms, such as human beings, in a way that allows each expression of life to fully demonstrate the magnificence that lies within them by giving every sentient being the power to create their own inner reality and to impact the exterior experience that the collective is producing. So it's not God's intention to create a bunch of slaves that simply do what he says and have to obey her, or she will send them to hell. It's God's intention to empower her children, even as we hope to empower our own children here on earth. I don't want to raise my children to think they have to obey everything I say, even when they're 35 or 40 or 50 years old. But I want to empower them to make their own choices, their own decisions, and to decide who and what they wish to be on this planet and how they wish to experience their life.
I love what you said. Oh, sorry. Yeah,
That's what gives. I was simply going to add, that's what gives God her greatest joy. He is happiest when he sees that all of her children are empowered to make their own choices.
That's so beautiful. My daughter, when I ask her to do something, she's 7, and she says to me, "You're not the boss of me, mommy." And I says, "That's actually right. I'm not." And yes. I think exposing her to this, because I listen to these materials, and as a mindset coach, studying about how the laws work and the mechanics of the mind. And I work with Peggy McCall, who loves you, I know you know her. And it's just like listening to so many lessons. And especially, I love your statement. Understanding replaces the forgiveness in the mind of the master. Like, I've studied that sentence for so many times. And you have said that there is no need for forgiveness in the book. Forgiveness in true love. Like, how can you say that? Like, how can this be true? That there is no need for forgiveness in the true love?
I think I think that forgiveness can be a useful tool at the beginning of our spiritual journey. So I think there is a place for forgiveness when we are first starting off on the journey of the soul as intelligent, what the Catholics call the age of reason, which is apparently 7 or 8 years old. So at the beginning of our journey, okay, forgiveness can be helpful and useful. But as we grow into and mature into our true self, we then understand that God forgives us for nothing. By the way, people go crazy when I give talks in churches and I stand up at the church pulpit and I say, I've come here today to tell you that God will never forgive you for anything. The place goes crazy because they want to think that God forgives us. But God will never forgive you for anything, for a very good reason. For the same reason that you don't have to forgive a 2-year-old baby for anything. Because God can't be hurt or damaged or upset or angered or frustrated in any way. Least of all by something that we would do, because we are to God like a 2-year-old baby would be to us, to make a comparison. So when we're holding a 2-year-old baby or a 6-month-old baby in our arms, and we're all dressed in our finest clothes, and we're really enjoying this hugging and squeezing that little baby, little 6-month-old baby, and she has a little unfortunate biological accident. We don't say, it's okay, sweetheart, I forgive you. We don't forgive a baby for what a baby might do, because it's a baby. And we are like tiny babies in the eyes of God, in the sense that we have still not even begun to remember who we really are or what is really true about life, about the world, about ourselves, and about God. So God doesn't forgive us for anything but God understands how a species like human beings could behave the way we're behaving. And so understanding replaces forgiveness in the mind of the master. And when I understand even why I did some of the things that I did in my life that I'm not proud of, I've done a few things in my life that I'm not proud of. Maybe, let me see, I put them down on my computer, on my phone. How many things have I done that I'm not proud of? 1. I've only done one thing in my whole life that I'm not proud of. But I'm different from most people who have a longer list. But when I understand why I did such a thing, because at the time I did it, it made total sense to me. As Conversations with God told us, nobody does anything inappropriate given our model of the world. Nobody does anything inappropriate given their model of the world. So it's understandable. Now I know why I did that. I maybe not do it again. I might have changed my mind about who I want to be, but I understand why I did that. So understanding replaces forgiveness in the mind of the master. And I've had to use that in my life. Certain people have done things that have hurt my feelings or damaged me in some way. But when I look inside of that, and why would they do that? I see. That doesn't mean I agree with it. It doesn't mean that I approve of it. It doesn't mean that I want them to do it again and again. But I do understand how they could do such a thing. I love the example that I was given in the book. Pope John Paul II was shot when he was going through Rome on a motorcade. He was in his car, waving to all the people, and he was shot 6 times by an assassin, and every bullet hit him. None missed him, but by some miracle, he lived. And he went to the jail cell of his attempted assassin. Of course, they caught him immediately. They jumped all over him, and they threw him in jail for life, gave him a life sentence for trying to kill the Pope. And the Pope went to his jail cell and said, "What, help me to understand. Why would you do such a thing? I can't agree with it. I won't ever think it was a good idea, but I would at least like to understand." And the man said, "I'll tell you why." And then he explained that he was a Muslim, he was from Turkey, and he felt that the Catholic Church had done more to hurt or damage Islam and Muslims around the world than any other single cause or any other single organization. So he was going to get him back, revenge, and by killing the Pope. The Pope said, I don't think that was the way to solve your problem. But now at least I understand why you would do such a thing. And so the Pope said, I understand. And I'm sorry that you felt that way. You know what's interesting? The Pope and this prisoner became pen pals. They wrote letters back and forth from the prison to the Vatican, back to the prisoner, back to the Vatican for years. They wrote every month back and forth to each other. And finally, after 7 years in prison, the Pope asked the civil authorities to release the man, to give him a full pardon. The Pope said he served 7 years in jail. After all, I didn't die. He didn't kill me. 7 years is long enough to pay for that offense. And of course, the civil authorities agreed with the Pope to do what the Pope requested, and they released the man and gave him a full pardon. Why? Because understanding replaces forgiveness in the mind of the master. And the Pope was trying to make a point. And there was someone long before the Pope, maybe 2 or 3 weeks before the Pope became the Pope, 2 or 3 weeks, or maybe it was 2 or 3 months, or maybe it was 2,000 or 3,000 years. But somewhere before that, some guy was walking around the planet saying things like, love, love, love your enemies, and pray for those who persecute you. And when a man slaps you on the right cheek, turn and offer him your left. And when a man steals your coat, give him your shirt as well. And when a man demands that you walk 1 mile with him, go with him too. And raise not your fist to heaven, and curse the darkness not, but be a light unto the darkness, that you might know who you really are, and that all those whose lives you touch will know who they really are as well. This guy told us this a couple of weeks ago, and nobody's listening. Nobody's paying attention. We've been given the way to experience our true identity as individual expressions of God. We've been given those instructions by every spiritual master through the centuries. We're simply not listening.
I do agree. I sometimes feel like
I'm glad you agree, because if you didn't agree, you'd be going to hell.
See, I don't believe that anymore, thanks to you and your conversations with God. And I love the examples and I love the understanding. And one of the most powerful lessons for me, actually, to shift my understanding, thanks to you, was when I started studying how the mind works and all these mechanics, and being the source. If I would love more love, I need to be the love. But like you said, pure love, like give and don't expect anything back. But then you said something which completely shifted my understanding in a profound way. And that is, be the source in a life of another. And when you were talking about the Pope, and I just so feel that love, joy, compassion, more understanding would actually change people if they start asking questions. It's almost like we're walking on the planet like an ignorant, and I love you earlier mentioned minions. You know, we don't have to, we have everything here. And you know, all these masters who are giving us the information, like you said. What do you think is the biggest problem in the world? Because I think we have more well, it's not about the information, but we have more access to actually really understand things on a deeper level. We have access to you, or, you know, you come to a clubhouse on Wednesdays where you answer people's questions. Like in the days, all the days, people couldn't just hop on these beautiful Zooms and talk to people, ask the questions. So actually we are so much further in involvement. And yet it's sometimes, maybe it's just my perception, it's like people have these blinds on the eyes and don't want to ask questions. What do you think is the biggest problem in the world today?
I think the biggest problem in the world today is that nobody knows what the biggest problem in the world today is. We see the fallout, we see the result of the problem. I can put that in one word: alienation. I have never seen alienation at such a level that I'm seeing now on our planet. Alienation between people of different races, different religions, different sexes, different political points of view, different economic status, different sexual orientation. Everybody is alienated from everybody else. The problem's over there, the problem's over there. They're the problem, they're the problem, they're the problem. And there's this huge alienation that's all over the planet. But we can't figure out what is causing all this alienation. And that's the biggest problem in the world. We can't solve the problem until we know what is causing the problem. It's like when your car won't start. If your car won't start and you don't know why, you're not going to go anywhere. So you have to call a mechanic to figure out, why is my car not working? And maybe if he's a good mechanic, he can tell you what's the matter and he can fix it. So we have to figure out what is causing the alienation. And what I've been told in my conversations with God is that it's really very simple. Alienation is caused by a thought that human beings have had for hundreds of thousands of years. It's a thought of separation. Separation is the idea that human beings have been carrying around from the beginning of time, from the beginning of recorded history. We are separate from each other. We're separate in a sense, actually, from life. We're watching life, but we're separate from it. We don't have any control over it. And we're separate, of course, from God. God's up there and we're down here, and we're separate. So we believe in separation. It starts with a separation theology. We do believe that we're separate from God. Even people who believe in God says, no, we're separate from God. So we've adopted a separation theology, which creates a separation cosmology. That is a way of seeing all of life as an experience of separate entities and separate elements interacting with each other. And a separation cosmology inevitably produces a separation psychology. That is an idea that, oh my God, I'm all alone out here. It's me, I'm all by myself. It's me against the world. And a separation psychology inevitably produces a separation sociology. We gather together in groups in order to stop ourselves from feeling separate. So we join political parties, we join movements, we claim that we are a certain nationality, we tell everyone else to stay out, build walls between us and everybody else. We form little groups so that we don't have to feel so separate from each other. And a separation sociology inevitably produces a separation pathology. Pathological behaviors of self-destruction, evidenced in human interactions throughout human history. We have had armed conflict on this planet for 92% of recorded history. It's going on today. In the age of enlightenment, we call ourselves an enlightened species, and we're still killing each other when we disagree with each other. We can't find a way to disagree with each other without trying to harm the person we disagree with. I'll show you. I'll teach you a lesson. Like barbarians. We are like barbarians, like cavemen from the beginning of time, because we think we're separate from each other. But if I suddenly understand, oh, wait a minute, I'm not separate from anybody. You're just another expression of the single thing that I am an expression of. I'm not separate from you just because I look different from you. I mean, thank goodness that you look different from me, because the world wouldn't want to be as ugly as I am. But here you are, drop dead gorgeous. People look at you and they go, oh my God, what a beautiful human being. But that doesn't mean that we're separate from each other any more than the fingers of my hand are separate from each other. They all look different. They all act different. They all have different functions, but they're not separate from each other. They're all part of the same hand, which is part of the same body. We are all, therefore, part of the same body, what I call the body of God. Now, when I see that, when I understand that deeply, then I realize that what I do for you, I do for me. And what I fail to do for you, I fail to do for me. And if we adopted that understanding on a global level, we would solve all of the human-made problems overnight. It's really quite simple.
The awareness. It's just so beautiful what you said. It brought me back to your analogy of the wave as a part of the ocean. And I remember my grandma, she said to me, think of Jesus and disciples. It started with the separation. Palestinians, Israelis. I mean, I don't want to go into like a political bit, but she said it started with the separation of the family. And she was telling me stories. And she said, look at all the problems that are in the world are because of the separation. I never paid so much attention to it like when you actually were talking right now. And it's been flashed into our face as humans so many times. And all we need to do is listen and do our part. And the solutions already here. I believe the solution's here. Like, what can we do as a humanity?
It's really very simple. We were told by all the masters, each in their own way, have told us the same thing. Do unto others as you would have it done unto you. Treat everyone else as if they were you. Talk to them the way you want to be talked to. Treat them the way you want to be treated. Respond to them the way you want to be responded to. And understand them the way you hope you will be understood when you're not being your best self. Simply treat everyone else the way you want to be treated. It's really very simple. There's no mystery here. We've been told this by every master from every spiritual tradition from the beginning of time.
So true.
We simply refuse to do it because we are like children and we're very, very young. As a species, I mean.
Yeah.
And so, because we're so immature as a species, we are acting like children. But the time has come, I believe, for us to grow up. We've been here long enough now to reach the age of reason. And we should be able to see that the way we have been behaving with each other is simply not working. It's not working.
That's why I love what you offer in the God Solution. And I really invite every single one of you to get the book and read it, because it really has so many answers to and path, like the light. And I say, if you like, I love what you said as well, because when you doing something onto others, I love when you're shining on someone, you're shining on your own path. But not because you expect it back, it just happens. And, you know, by the way, I should have mentioned, thank you for your beautiful compliment, and you're very handsome yourself. So I would absolutely love to ask you, you're an author of 37 books, 39? Oh,
39.
I got mixed up now.
39, but who's counting?
But just the way you express, what motivated you to run? Is it the world's awareness, or what motivated you to write the God Solution?
I wanted to find a way to articulate directly and briefly the major message of the 9 Conversations with God dialogue books. Because I could see that the world was in deep trouble. And so I thought, before I leave here, because I'm going to be going soon, I'm not a young man anymore. I'm going to be 80 soon. And so, I'll be leaving soon. And I thought, before I go, I want to bring together in one place the most important messages of the Conversations with God dialogues. So that if people only picked up one book in their life, they might say, you know what, this is one of the most important books I ever read. And that's what motivated me to do it. Just looking out into the world and seeing how the world is. I have 9 children and I have 5 grandchildren. I don't want them to have to step into a world the way it is now starting to be. I see myself as one of the last members of a golden era in the 50s, in the 60s, in the 70s, even a little bit in the 80s. Things started turning sour, started turning in the second half of the 80s and in the 90s and in the 2000s. But you can't even imagine how wonderful life was on this planet in the 60s, but I can because I was in my 20s. I was 23, 24, 25 years old in the 60s. And what a great place to live. You could actually drink water out of the ocean or out of the river, and it wasn't contaminated. You could actually eat, food and it was pure. You could actually disagree with people and not worried about somebody punching you in the face. It was a whole different world. Not that there was no bad things happening, but not the way it is today. So I want to see if we can bring our children and our grandchildren a life, a way of living that was the way it was when I was a young man, back in ancient history.
It's not ancient history, but I totally feel you. Not that I've lived in 60s, and I'm not going to pretend anything, but I grew up in Czechoslovakia, and it was a post-communism country. And I remember my grandparents and my mom, and we grew up so together. Like I have 28 cousins, and we didn't have to, but we did have to go and see grandma after the church. But the unity I felt as a child, I don't feel anymore. And when somebody says to me, why did you swap and started studying this mind and stuff? I'm so beautifully, magnificently obsessed with finding out something that can help my children, because exactly like you said, I don't want them to live in this world. And I know it's not a great statement to make, maybe, perhaps, but I really feel what you said is just so profoundly important. More people starting to understand what's happening and really take an action. Because like you said, we really need to grow up. We do.
Yeah. I've had the happy privilege of being in Czechoslovakia a number of times to give talks. So I've been invited there more than once.
Oh, great.
Yes, to speak.
Mm.
And I loved it when I was there. The world is full of wonderful people all over the place.
Yes, I agree.
All we have to do is understand who we are and why we're here. That's what most people don't understand. Most people don't know who they are and why we're here. I mean, Shakespeare, you're now living in England. I'm sure you've heard a little bit about this guy that was around a few years ago.
Heard something.
Yeah, Bill. I call him Bill Shakespeare. He said, "There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy." To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to rise up against a sea of troubles, and by opposing to end them. To die, to sleep, perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub. For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come? We have shuffled off this mortal coil. So, the great writers of all the world's cultures have told us all we need to know. All we have to do is listen to what we've been told. It's really quite simple.
I am so grateful. And I know it's coming, you're giving me an absolute precious time. I know time is precious, and I am really deeply grateful for you sharing your message. I invite everyone to read, I would say, Conversations with God as well, but I love the God Solution. I actually listened to it 4 times just over the last month, and there is always something new I hear, which I would have sworn I haven't heard before. And I think it's a book which we need to revisit many, many times and really think about that. Thank you so much, Neale. Is there anything else you would love to add?
No, I think we've covered the waterfront. Thank you for those nice words, and I agree with you. I hope people will, grab a copy of that. You can get it at Amazon or really any online bookstore. The book is called The God Solution, and it provides a solution to the many, many challenges and problems being faced by humanity. Thank you for giving me a chance to tell people about it, and I hope we have a chance to talk to each other again sometime.
I'm sure we will. I love following your teachings, and thank you. And if there's anything I can ever do or anyone else, I'm sure we would love to help. Have an absolutely fantastic day, and I will see you around.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye.